Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we've got an important show for you today, I know, because you are a big proponent of support after sibling loss, right?
Absolutely, and for building awareness, and we are going to have 2 siblings on today that have had a sibling death.
All right.
Yeah.
And they've also published a book together, right?
The Loss of a Lifetime, Grieving Siblings Share Stories of Love, Loss, and Hope.
They've got their essays in here, so you're going to want to pick this up, and we'll talk about it on the show today and a little bit after the show. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon, wherever books are sold. All right, Heidi, you want to introduce our guest?
Sure, and like you said, Mom, we're going to talk about the sudden death of a sibling, something that I unfortunately know a little bit about.
It's been a long time, right?
It has. It's been over 40 years.
Wow.
So it has been a very long time. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about really what it's like to have a sibling die suddenly and how it impacts our life.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I love it.
It does impact our life, and there's not a beginning and an ending.
For sure.
And it impacts it sometimes in positive ways and sometimes in negative. So let's start with Lynn, who's sitting closest to us. Lynn Shattuck.
Hi, Lynn.
Lynn's brother Will died at 21 of substance use. Lynn has been publishing essays on the topic of sibling loss for more than a decade. She founded the website lossofalifetime.com, and she is the co-editor of the Sibling Loss Anthology, which we just talked about.
Absolutely.
So next to her is Susan Casey.
Hi.
Hey, Susan.
Hi.
Susan has an essay in the Sibling Loss Anthology, and she is also an Open to Hope writer. Her brother Rocky died at 43 after having 2 seizures. And Susan is a licensed mental health clinician, a podcaster, and a certified bereavement group facilitator. She is the author of the award-winning book, Rock On, after her brother, Rock On, Mining for Joy in the Deep River of Sibling Grief. So welcome to our show, Lynn and Susan.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. This is really great.
It's great to have you on the show today. You know, I'm thinking, well, I have a sibling loss too, but I am an adult with older siblings. And, you know, you guys had them die in their 20s. Your brother was how old?
He was 43.
He was 43. Your brother was?
21.
And your brother was?
17.
17.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and I think for all of us, that's not the normal time in life that we usually lose siblings. You know, I mean, I'm sure all of you expected to lose your brothers when you were much, much older.
Yeah, I think that you just feel that you're going to grow old with your siblings, you know, in the ideal world. And, you know, he had a little 3.5-year-old daughter, and, you know, and yeah, it's just something that you can't imagine, really, until it happens to you.
Absolutely. I know when Scott died, my grandfather was still alive. And he was in his 80s, and I
Wow.
think it was hard for him, you know, because he was thinking, well, this should have been me, not my grandson.
And your grandmother was living too, both.
Yeah, but I remember Grandpa more than his reaction.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Which makes a point. People react in different ways, resolve it differently, and the time comes in. But there's not a lot of support, I'm hearing, for sibling loss.
Right.
You
There's
want to
more
comment
now
on
than
that?
there used to be, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I my experience was, you know, I was 24. I was kind of launching my adult life, and my brother died, and I ended up moving back to Alaska where my parents were. And I just remember at his service, people coming up to me and saying, "Be strong for your parents." It's almost like they get a script or something from someone. And I've heard that from other siblings too, that's just a common kind of sentiment. And so that was kind of my first clue, I guess, that there weren't going to be, you know, adequate resources. And then I would go online and look for books on the topic, and there was literally like one book that was out of print.
Yeah, how long was this been?
This was in 1999. So we have come quite a way since then. But at the time there was nothing.
It's interesting because in 1999 I was writing my doctoral dissertation on the sudden death of a sibling.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Ironically.
Wow.
And there was nothing.
Yeah.
Like I did an exhaustive literature search and there were so few articles written about it and so many articles written on other kinds of loss.
Yeah.
But also, they didn't want you to do that topic.
They didn't.
Really?
My committee was very against it because they felt like this is a topic too close to us, too near and dear to our hearts, too emotional, which for me, I was like, yes, and that's why I want to do it.
Right.
So,
Right.
And it's still the same right now with trying to get a book published on grief. No one, they're like, oh, it's a great book, but we have no idea how to market it. And I'm like, really? Everybody deals with grief. So it's always been interesting to me in the publishing world why it is so difficult to get some of these books published.
People don't, it's hard for them to talk about grief and loss unless you're in it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you need it.
Yeah.
You know,
and you go to Open to Hope and you go find things on it.
And you know, you can go on Amazon and find your book and whatever. Talk about your brother's death. He died of a seizure.
So yeah, my brother, he was a spa director for Four Seasons Resorts over in Bali, and then he accepted a new position in Hong Kong for Rosewood Hotels, and he was sick when he arrived, and then within a span of 3 days, he had a couple of seizures and then died very suddenly from encephalitis of the brain. It would take us a year to get the autopsy reports, and we still don't know what caused the virus of the brain. It was,
It's hard with the overseas losses.
It was unbelievable. Yeah.
Getting the body in, doing
the
all
whole
those
thing. My brother and I flew over for 3 weeks. We were in Asia, and we had to get his body released to the crematorium. They never cremate Americans over there on this particular island. It was a thing. And then we flew his ashes back to Bali, which is where he lived, and we released his ashes in the ocean.
Wow, that's emotional.
And your family was in Alaska? So and your brother died
He died in Seattle.
Okay. So that again is the support system is in different areas. That's tough.
And what was the story around his loss, like his death?
Around his, so I knew that he had done some experimenting with drugs, and my parents weren't kind of aware of the extent of it.
Which is so normal for siblings.
So normal.
We know things about our brothers and sisters that our parents don't know.
Yep. Exactly. And I remember telling him, like, you need to stop. I'm going to tell mom and dad. You know, now it sounds ridiculous in retrospect, but yeah.
You were the big sister?
I was the big sister. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's talk about that a little bit. How about guilt and being the survival guilt for a sibling?
I had horrible guilt because I did have this knowledge of his substance use. And so at the time, I really, I was 24 looking back like that. That's a kid. I was a kid myself. And I really just believed that if I had just told my parents, things would be different and we wouldn't be in this situation. So I held on to that guilt for quite a while. Yeah.
How did you let go of that? Have you let go of it?
I have. Yeah, I think over time, learning more about substance use disorder and meeting other people who had similar stories, but maybe their journey went on longer. And just kind of realizing that there's no, I didn't have that type of control. I couldn't have stopped his death.
We don't know what would have happened if you had told him. He still might have had the same fate, right?
It could have ruined our relationship. It could have strained his relationship with my parents. Who knows? Yeah.
How about you, Susan? Did you have any?
Oh my God, I had so much guilt. It's funny because in the work that I do, working with people around grief and loss, I always say people don't go to therapy because they miss their loved one. You're always going to miss your loved one. They come as a result of the stuff that bubbles to the surface as a result, guilt, shame, all of anger. And I had terrible guilt because he lived so far away. When he was in Bali, it was a 12-hour time difference. So, 8 o'clock in the morning there was 8 o'clock at my time. And so he would call and sometimes I wouldn't pick up because it was late. And I could still cry sometimes thinking about that time that you lose because you think you have forever.
Right. It's so true.
So it took me a long time to work through my guilt, and I write about that in the book because I think that guilt can be so debilitating for people, and it's something I feel they can hang on to for a lifetime if they don't get some help around it in some way. And it was probably the worst part, other than missing my brother so deeply, was the guilt that I felt after his death.
How about you, Heidi? Did you have survival guilt?
My guilt was that the wrong child died.
Oh, wow.
So my brother was the only boy, and there was in the middle of a sea of girls, and he was a family hero for us before he died, for his sisters. You know, there's a lot of sibling rivalry between the girls, but he just was, and he was like an athlete, and everybody loved him, and he was really good looking, and he was really easy to get along with, and he was funny. He was like our mediator and our family humorist, you know, and losing him was so big, and he carried the family name, and my dad has no brothers. So there was why was it him and not me? Yeah. So that was something that I struggled with, and it was hard to get support around that, because when you tell your parents that, they're like, reassuring you that that's ridiculous, you know what I mean? Like, we wouldn't want any of our kids to die. But when I met other siblings and got peer support, I finally realized how normal it was to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, other people feel like this, it's not just me.
Yeah.
And you know, when a sibling dies, they take up a lot of emotional energy in the family, larger than life. And so you think, well, maybe this, the wrong child died.
I'll have to say one thing before, and I want to get back into that, but as a parent who lost a 17-year-old son, you also feel guilty. You feel guilt that you couldn't save them, because if you can't save them, you're not going to be able to save other people either. You know, other people could die, other things could happen. So I think...
well, it's interesting because there was a research study done that said that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes when a sibling dies, the surviving children realize that their parents can't save them. It all of a sudden dawns on them that, wow, our parents may not be able to prevent these kind of things. And when my brother died, my mother called me, and I don't know how this was for you all, and apologized. She wasn't even with him.
Yeah.
So I was like, Mom, I don't understand. She's like, I'm sorry I couldn't save him. And I'm like, but you weren't there. So it's interesting that, there is that pull.
I think it's a control.
Protecting.
It's so scary inside to have things like that happen.
And I think too, I think both for the sibling and the parent, at least this is my experience, this idea that nobody is safe. Like, oh, if I could lose this brother, this means, and I had this debilitating fear with my younger brother, who's 9.5 years younger than me, and he would fly, and I would be in terror that something was going to happen, and he's like, sis, you've got to stop. And I wanted to, but I couldn't help it, because suddenly I was like, oh my God, if I can lose Rocky, I can lose anybody at any time. And you know that, but you don't know it until it happens to you.
And it's interesting because it impulsively will happen. Like the phone will ring and it'll be really late, and I'll be like,
no, terrifying.
Somebody died.
Yeah,
like
me
that,
too.
I go immediately to
Me
that
too.
thought, and I'm like, stop it, Heidi.
I know.
You haven't even answered the phone yet.
Yeah, it's brutal.
So, Lynn, you're nodding, so I'm guessing some of this is resonating with you, just the idea.
Definitely, yeah, just thinking about, kind of having that bubble popped of we're okay and everything's going to turn out all right. And then when something like that happens and you lose someone, it just realize how fragile everybody is and how...
And especially a peer, I mean, someone that's our age, around. I just read a New York Times article, I don't know if you read it, it talked about siblings. And it said that siblings have more of an influence on each other than anybody else, including parents.
It's funny, when I was writing my book, I found groundbreaking research in the New York Times about just this, that that siblings up to 10 years later can still have stroke, heart attack from losing a sibling, because the idea is that losing a child is the hardest thing. But this article was from a clinical psychologist who lost a child, and that it can actually have longer term ramifications for siblings, because nobody knows you like your sibling.
Right.
And like you said, you tell each other secrets, yeah.
Well, the biggest loss you can have is the loss you've had.
Right.
Right.
I mean, you don't know. Losses are so personal. Whatever loss you've had is
100%.
the big loss for you. Comparing losses is really...
But it's weird. People, it happens in the world of loss,
Yes, it does.
Because people want so desperately, because they can't imagine that anyone could be as in much pain as they are.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you go to different groups, like we'll go to Compassionate Friends. If people haven't lost a child, people get gnarly with them. Or if you go to Twinless Twins and try to speak if you're not a twin. I mean, it's like if you haven't had the experience But it's true, if you haven't had the experience, you don't know what that
Right.
experience is like.
Exactly.
But also, it's different for different people depending on backgrounds and what kind of losses you've had and, you know, what you know. And the way your family responds and what kind of a person you are and the way you respond.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you all, you're experts on sibling loss. And I wanted to ask you, if somebody is watching the show right now and they've lost a sibling, what's your advice? Or what's the hardest thing, or what comes up for you that you'd want to know?
I would say to take care of yourself really, really well and to find other siblings. I really think that for me was the thing that I wanted the most.
The peer support.
The peer
Where did you
support.
find it?
I found, at the time, I found like an email friend. We were in like a grief chat room together at the time, and she was living in California, and we were the same age, but our lives were completely different. But we both just lost brothers, and we emailed like every day.
Wow.
And that.
So you
What
found her
is-
online. I love that's. I
Yeah.
love the virtual worlds that are going on
Yeah.
for siblings right now online.
Yeah, and there's so
great.
much more possibility for that now. in
The
their
Compassionate Friends has a sibling chat, right?
They do.
Yes.
They have Sounds of the Siblings and TCF Sibs. So, and then they also have virtual, meetings. So they've got.
And there's a lot in your community too now, a lot of more support than there used to be in the grief world. And so, what would be your advice, Susan?
I would say that's very similar, because I think siblings can really get lost in the fray. I think that people are so worried about the parents, or if the sibling is old enough to have a family. And I think that so for me it is create space for your grief, if it's through peer support, resources like Open to Hope. I had said before you guys started filming that it was a saving grace for me. I got to read other siblings. I was desperate. I didn't know anybody who had lost a sibling. I was in this, I just found myself to be so lost. I didn't know what to do. I was trying to be there for my parents and my sister-in-law, and I was like, same thing, friends, you got to be strong for all of these people. And it felt like there was no space for me to hold it so I could have my own grief. I've heard siblings even say they feel like they're not even deserving of their grief. And so, find friends, find a grief group if there is one. Know when you need help. I think that's the other thing. It's like, being sad is not pathological, but there's some point where I knew I needed help. I just knew it. And I did all the things. I had a therapist. I went to an energy worker. I went, and I became a bereavement group facilitator. I surround yourself with support and know that your grief is your own, and you've got to leave space for it, because grief will find a way to move through you. It just will. And if you don't allow the space, it'll leak out all over the place in lots of different ways.
How about you?
I like
What
that.
helped you? Or what did you find? Probably not a lot in that day.
Oh, what did I find helped? It was definitely finding people that had had sibling loss.
Yeah.
But there are messages out there. It was also validating my own loss.
Yes.
And saying, this is really horrific. This is really big. This is, and I didn't realize I would lose my identity initially. Like, who am I without Scott?
Yeah.
It was such an identity loss, but the validation that I gave myself, because there was so many messages, not from my mom and not from my dad, from the world, of be strong for your parents.
Right.
The worst loss that can ever happen is the death of a child. Your parents have been through a lot. So hiding a lot from them because I thought I was being a good kid.
Yeah.
We don't want to give them any more pain. And so I think, yes, that all of those.
I wanted to ask you all, put your heads around this. What if I had a really ambivalent relationship with my sibling, and now I realize this thing is never going to get resolved? I mean, we'll never be
That's
able to
tough.
work this out, And then Heidi was talking about Scott. It reminded me a little bit about that he was so perfect when you were talking about him, and you didn't even have a chance for him to become older and blow you off and get mad at each other and work through all. You think you have a lifetime to work through those sibling problems, and you don't.
Right.
Yeah. So what's your thought for people who they're hearing you guys talk and thinking, that's great, but my brother or my sister ruined my life.
I don't think that's less painful at all. I think it probably is more complicated in some ways because there's all that spectrum of possibilities of what could have been, you know, if it was a relationship where people thought that maybe they were going to mend it eventually, because you do assume that you have, you know, another 30, 40, 50 years to work things out.
Yeah.
So I think it's just the closing of any possibility of that happening is incredibly complicated and painful, and probably comes with a lot of guilt, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with my clients, I wrote my
I
dissertation.
was going to say, I think you've got some techniques you can probably give people.
Well, I wrote my dissertation before my brother died. When I was getting my MSW, my dissertation was writing through grief, loss, and trauma.
Wow.
Right.
That's so ironic.
Right. And so I had all of this research behind writing through our trauma, and then of course I wrote through mine when I wrote my book, and I was like, wow, this really works. But anyway, I have a lot. My clients, I give them all a lot of writing exercises because when you write, you're able to, because we spin in our head, we create narratives and stories, and when you write, it accesses a different part of your well, it moves you into a heart space, and you can really connect to your higher self, your soul, and you can write in a way that you can write letters to your sibling. For those of you who believe that the spirit lives on, as I do, they don't require forgiveness. It's us trying to find forgiveness for ourselves. And so people who have estranged siblings, to write to them, you know, and you can write a letter back from them.
Yeah, I like that. So write a letter to your sibling and answer the way you think.
Yes.
And have them
And it's
answer it.
very powerful.
I love that. Well, you know, it's interesting because in my private practice, which is pretty much mainly siblings, not all siblings, but most siblings, a lot of them had ambivalent relationships. And that's why they came to me, because they can't work it through.
Right.
And some of them even said, we were close, but we didn't know it then. Once they died, they realized what they missed. And like you all were saying, there's no time to repair it. As we get older, our relationships change, and they couldn't do that. And so there's a lot of guilt, shame.
Well, you also don't get distancing, depending on how now your brother was a little older, so you had a little more distancing. You two didn't have a lot of distancing. So you're not able to resolve those issues, you know, at a distance, or make those changes into being grown up and having them bring a partner into the relationship
or have
you're going to
kids
have
together,
to deal with.
Exactly.
So
there's a lot of regret. That's why I love that it's never too late to repair relationships, even when our siblings aren't here. I love that idea of writing.
I think what it comes down to, and I'll say this to my clients, it's about forgiving the human aspect of ourselves. We're human.
Yeah.
You know, sure, when somebody dies, in hindsight, wouldn't we all just love to be perfect? I mean, it doesn't exist. We're human beings. So in honoring the relationship is honoring who we are as human beings, and being able to love ourselves through this life. You know, because as I said, our siblings, like you know, they're okay, they're fine. It's those of us left behind where we really have to grapple with being human, that we're not perfect, but this is how we grow through these experiences.
And the sibling relationship's complicated.
Yes.
We do. We love them. We fight with them. They're our arch enemy. They're our best friends. We try on different roles with them. They're safe people.
Yes.
So it's complicated.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say to anybody who's watching or listening to this show today, if you're a bereaved sibling, I just want to say, go for it.
Yeah.
Grieve. I don't care how long it's been. Get together with other people, find people, join a sibling group, doing whatever you need to do, and talk about it. I think talking about it like we are right now is so important.
Or just go on and listen to podcasts and go into chat rooms on Facebook, because by reading and hearing other things, you start to feel like what I'm going through is normal.
And there's so many groups out there now on Facebook that are specific to sibling loss, you know, that you really can get on there and, you know, join with other people. And the other thing that I'll say, I think, and you must see this all the time in your own profession, but what I'm learning about grief is that so often we can't accept the loss, so we're in that resistance, and that can prolong the suffering because we haven't even started the grieving yet. We do this pain management stuff. We grab onto our anger or the injustice or our guilt, and it's prolonging the actual space of grieving the deep loss. And and this is some of the stuff I explain to my clients, that you can really delay your own grieving because you haven't even accepted that this is a reality, and that can take a while.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, tell us a little bit about your book and your website and where you are and how they can find you, and then we'll get to Lynn and let her tell us all her.
Okay, so Susan Casey, my website is Rock Your Shine, also after my brother, and my email is rockyourshine@gmail.com, and my book is Rock On, Mining for Joy in the Deep River of Sibling Grief.
All right. I love it. And how about you, Lynn? Tell us what you're up to. And
Yeah, we're just getting ready to release the anthology, which is called The Loss of a Lifetime. Grieving siblings share stories of love, loss, and hope. And that will be available in June on Kindle and in paperback. And we also have a website of resources for siblings, lossofalifetime.com.
And how long have you been doing lossofalifetime.com?
It's been, I think we launched it last year, so it's been about a full year that we've had it live and are doing sibling grief book clubs. And
okay, I want to know what got you from there to here, from here to there, from your brother's death to now. How many years has it been?
26.
Yeah, and now you are really launching. How did you get there?
How did I one step at a time, really. Yeah, and just, I right after he died, I really wished that there was a book, a resource, and all along the way, I think I kind of kept thinking someone else would do it.
So what
there are resources.
What do you do when you're not creating websites? And
I do a lot of writing. I've got teenagers at home, and they keep me busy.
She's an amazing writer, I just have to say. She will never say it, but she's an outstanding writer.
All right. Well, have you written other books then?
No, just lots of essays and stuff.
But we'll find it on
Ask
there.
her in a few years.
Yeah.
Loss of a Lifetime website.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you've got one last piece of advice for those bereaved siblings, give it to us.
I would say that just because your loss might not be the loss that we all say is the hardest loss, that it doesn't mean that it's not the hardest thing that you've ever gone through, and maybe the hardest thing that you ever do go through. It's valid.
It's valid. Thank you. That's great.
Mine is the same. Create space for your grief.
I love it. Well, Heidi and I want to thank everybody for joining us on this show today. It's been a great show, Heidi.
It has. I always love talking to other siblings, and it helps me every single time I do it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been a
Peer
pleasure.
support is really important for everybody that's watching the show today. So Heidi and I want to thank you all for joining us on this show today. And we always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.